An elderly black veteran in a wheelchair sits quietly outside a market until cruel teenagers pelt him with eggs and laughter. But when the video goes viral, no one expects the truth he's been hiding for decades. A buried war crime, a forgotten platoon, and a name the government tried to erase. What began as public mockery becomes a nationwide reckoning when the man they thought was broken finally speaks. I remember the cold of that concrete more than anything, the way it seeped through the wheels of my rusted chair and up my spine like a whisper that said I didn't belong. That sidewalk on Jennings Avenue, cracked, littered, forgotten, had been mine for years. I parked myself outside Delacroix Market every morning, same spot, same time, like clockwork. I wasn't beggin', no sir, never did like the word. I sold little paper roses I made from old church bulletins. People barely looked at me anymore. I was part of the landscape like the trash bins or the graffiti-stained mailbox with the bent flag. My name is Isaiah Briggs. I'm 72, and I only got one good leg. But what I had left, I used with dignity. At least I thought I did until that Tuesday when everything changed. It started with the hiss of a soda can cracked open behind me, the lazy chuckle of boys with too much time and no respect in their eyes. I didn't turn around. You learn not to give them your eyes. That just feeds them. Yo, old wheels, one of 'em spat you drop something. Then came the first egg. Splat. Right on the arm of my jacket. I blinked, jaw tight. Then another, this one caught my face yolk dripping down the bridge of my nose like yellow tears. I heard laughter, high and vicious. Smile for the camera. Grandpa, one of them shouted, and I realized one of them was filming me. I didn't flinch. I just sat there. I wiped the yolk away with the corner of my sleeve and kept folding my roses. That's when someone screamed, not me. Not the kids, but a woman I hadn't noticed standing at the bus stop across the street. She had her phone up, too, but her hands were shaking. "You sick little bastard," she yelled. "He's a human being." The boys, scattered like cockroaches, their sneakers slapping pavement, leaving behind only giggles and eggshells. I looked at her and nodded once. "Don't chase shadows, miss," I said softly. They disappear in the light. She didn't understand what I meant, but I saw something shift in her eyes. Her name was Tasha, and she was about to change my life. That video went viral. Fast. It had a title before I even knew it existed. Teen's Egg Disabled Man in Wheelchair. But he stays silent. 4 million views in a day. They said I was stoic. They said I was the face of dignity. All I knew was my face was on every screen in the country, dripping with yolk and silence. Reporters started showing up. They didn't ask my name at first, they just said, "Sir, how does it feel to be a symbol of strength?" I didn't answer, because they weren't talking to me. They were talking to an idea of me. A character they made up who didn't speak and didn't fight back. But I had a voice. I just hadn't used it in a long time. You see, there's history in these bones. I wasn't always Isaiah the Eggman. I was Sergeant Isaiah Briggs, 101st Airborne. I jumped into the jungles of Vietnam with nothing but a rifle and a pocket Bible my mama gave me. I lost my leg in a village I still dream about. Came back stateside to parades, then pity, then silence. The VA sent checks the government forgot my name, and the years stacked like dust on a forgotten shelf. I don't tell people that, though. Folks only hear what fits their story. But Tasha, she wanted the truth. She came back the next day. camera off, notebook closed, just a coffee in one hand and nervous eyes. "Mr. Sir, can I talk to you?" "For real this time?" she asked. I nodded and gestured to the spot beside me. She sat, legs crossed, jacket pulled tight around her. "My name's Tasha Green. I'm a freelance journalist. Used to write for the Ledger before, well, layoffs. I don't want to write another viral sob story. I want your story. Your real story." I looked at her, measured her voice, and saw she wasn't lying. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. "Come back tomorrow," I said. "Bring 2 coffees." "Black?" She smiled. "Deal." That night I sat in my room, if you could call it that. Basement of an old church, one flickering bulb a cot with a mattress thin as forgiveness. I looked at the old photograph I kept in a plastic sleeve. Me in uniform, arm around my baby brother, right before he went off to Selma and never came back. There's weight in silence, you know. Not every man is quiet because he's weak. Some of us just got too much noise inside. The next day she came back, and the day after. We talked. At first it was slow. I told her about the roses, about the first time I was spit on in uniform, about the night I tried to file a police report when someone stole my wheelchair cushion and they laughed and said, "Isn't that government property?" And then I told her about the medals I sold for bus fare. I told her about the mayor who shook my hand once for a photo op and forgot my name the next minute. And I told her about the man I used to be. She cried once, quietly, when I showed her the scar under my chin from the explosion. She didn't take notes that day. She just listened. By the end of the week, she said, "Isaiah, I want to publish this. All of it. But I won't unless you say yes." I didn't say yes. I didn't say no either. I just looked her in the eyes and said, "Tell it like it happened." No pretty words, no hero music, just the truth. And she did. The article hit like a storm. The man they mocked was a war hero. They used the picture of me holding the folded roses, a tear on my cheek, not from pain, but from memory. TV crews came. News anchors said my name like it was scripture. Some people sent flowers. Others sent money. But what mattered most was the silence. The same silence I'd lived in for decades, but this time it wasn't empty. It was listening. One of the boys who threw the eggs came to find me. He stood across the street for hours one Saturday, hands shaking hood up. Eventually, he crossed and dropped to his knees. "I'm sorry, mister." I didn't know. I looked at him and said, "You didn't want to know." He nodded, tears falling. I gave him a rose. "Start here," I said. "Do better." That sidewalk, my sidewalk, became something new. People started bringing chairs, food, asking questions. It was like I'd become a mirror, and they didn't like what they saw in themselves. But I didn't ask for revenge. I asked for change, and change, it seemed, was coming. But what none of us knew yet, not Tasha, not me, not the world-clicking replay on my humiliation, was that there was more to my story, much more, because someone else had been watching, someone from my past, someone who knew a truth that even I had buried, and their arrival would shake everything. The weather turned sharp that morning, like the city had caught wind of my story and didn't know how to breathe anymore. The sidewalk outside Delacroix Market, once my quiet corner of anonymity, had become a public altar. Some folks brought flowers. Others came with pity in their eyes, like I was a cautionary tale carved into skin and steel. I didn't mind the looks so much as the questions. Why didn't you fight back, they asked. Why didn't you say something? I always gave them the same answer. You don't raise your voice in a storm. You wait. You listen. But something different stirred in the air that day, a presence. I felt it before I saw it. There's a heaviness to certain footsteps, especially when they're tied to memories you'd buried deep beneath pain and dirt. I was folding a new batch of roses when I heard him. Isaiah Briggs, the voice said, low and uncertain. I looked up and froze. He stood about 6 feet tall, maybe a few years younger than me, with skin dark as coffee and eyes like cracked glass, tired searching. His coat was old military issue worn at the elbows, buttons polished like ritual. His hands trembled as he clutched a folder thick with age and regret. I didn't recognize the face, not completely, but the name escaped my lips before I could stop it. Langston. He nodded once. Just once. But it hit me like a grenade to the chest. Langston Charles. My radio man. My shadow in Vietnam. We hadn't spoken in over 40 years. Not since that night. Not since the jungle swallowed our truth whole and the government told us what we saw never happened. He knelt beside my chair slowly, knees cracking like old wood. "Brother," he said, voice breaking. I found it. I kept it all. The photos, the tapes, the proof. I didn't know what to do with it until I saw you on the news. Until I saw them laugh. I didn't answer. My heart was too loud. My mind too crowded. Tasha was there. She'd come early with her camera slung low, trying not to intrude. But when she saw my face, she clicked into reporter mode. "Who is he?" she whispered. I took the folder from Langston's trembling hands. Opened it. Inside were records, grainy photographs, maps with red marks and cassette tapes labeled with names I hadn't spoken in decades. Names of villages the government said never existed. Names of men who died when the wrong coordinates were given. Friendly fire, they said. Tragic accident, they said. But Langston and I, we knew better. I flipped through the pages, my hands suddenly younger, shaking with the fury of a forgotten man. "Why now?" I whispered. "Because you're a symbol now," Langston said. "And symbols can't be silenced." That night, Tasha sat with us in the basement church-room recorder on her eyes wide. I didn't stop her. Not this time. Langston and I told everything about Operation Hollow Lance, about the bodies they told us not to count, about the children we buried with our own hands because the medevac never came. About the orders that made no sense, and the superior who vanished after the mission promoted and protected. We were made ghosts, Langston said. But ghosts can still scream. The story that hit the internet next was no longer about an old man and a carton of eggs. It was about betrayal, about buried truths and systemic silence, about 2 black veterans turned invisible until a teenager's cruelty forced the world to see. Within hours, veterans across the country were sharing their own stories, ones they'd kept locked behind medals and bad dreams. Hashtags flooded every platform Sakshir we served, too. Justice for Isaiah and Langston. Tasha's inbox exploded. The story wasn't just viral, it was volcanic. But with attention comes danger. 3 days later, a black SUV parked across from the church. 2 men in suits got out sunglasses despite the gray sky. They didn't knock. They just watched. Langston saw them first and cursed under his breath. "They're here," he said. It started. "What started?" Tasha asked, voice tight. "The cleanup," I said, staring back at the men. Same old playbook. Discredit, distract, disappear. Sure enough, the next morning a headline ran on a lesser-known news site, so-called Hero, was arrested in 1979. Is he lying about his service? The mugshot wasn't even mine, but the damage was done. The seed of doubt had it been planted. Langston slammed his fist against the table. They still think we won't fight back. But they were wrong. This time I wasn't going to fold my paper roses and look away. I'd spent a lifetime surviving shadows, being polite to the boots that stepped on my dignity. But now I had names, proof, witnesses, and a woman with a pen sharper than any bayonet I ever carried. We went public fully. Tasha helped organize a press conference. Local veterans stood beside me. Langston read the names of the forgotten out-loud voice, shaking but proud. I held up one of the cassettes like a relic. This, I said into the microphones, is truth. And you don't get to bury it just because it's inconvenient. The next day, Delacroix Market painted the bench I used gold. They called it Isaiah's seat. But I didn't sit on it, because I wasn't finished. There was one more person who needed to be confronted. Colonel Everett Sloan, the man who signed the orders for Operation Hollow Lance. The man who vanished from our unit's files. The man whose name Langston had traced now, retired living in a gated community 30 miles outside the city. And I was going to see him, not for revenge, for answers, because what he buried nearly killed us, and I wasn't about to let the country bury us again. They say you never forget the moment your life changes forever. But for me, it wasn't the egg. It wasn't even the laughter or the sting of yolk in my eyes. It was the moment that damn phone screen lit up a cold glass lens pointed straight at my soul like I was a spectacle. Not a man, not a veteran, just some pathetic old black guy in a chair background noise for the internet's next viral hit. And all I did was sit there and take it, because if I'd said a word, if I'd raised my voice, they'd call me angry, dangerous, unstable. You don't get to be loud when you've got skin like mine and wheels under you. Not in this city. But the world didn't see it that way. The world saw dignity. The world saw calm in the face of cruelty, and they replayed it. Over and over. Disabled man, egged by teens, doesn't react. That headline made me a symbol. Made me something more than a sidewalk ornament. But it also made me a target again. Because people don't like their heroes to have complicated histories. And mine was darker than the yolk they wiped from my face. Langston and I made our decision that morning we were going to face Colonel Everett Sloan. He was the last living officer tied to Operation Hollow Lance, and he was the man whose signature had sentenced an entire platoon to die. We didn't know what we'd find or if he'd even open the door, but we had to try. Not for revenge. For the ones who didn't come home. Tasha drove us. She'd stopped being just a reporter by then. She was part of the story. Her little beat-up Corolla creaked as we rolled into that pristine suburban hell. Gated lawns, fountains, flags, flown high next to manicured hedges. The kind of place built to keep people like me out. A security guard stopped us at the gate. Tasha leaned out and said, "We're visiting Colonel Sloan. We have an appointment." She was lying, but the guard didn't check, just waved us through. Old white colonels still carry weight, it seemed. Sloan's house sat at the end of the cul-de-sac, 2 stories of whitewashed brick and silence. We rolled up to the door. Langston helped me out. Tasha stayed back, phone in hand, not to record, just in case. I rang the bell. No answer. Then again. Finally, the door creaked open. He looked smaller than I remembered. Colonel Everett Sloan, once the booming voice behind the radio static, now just a man in slippers with liver spots on his hands. But those eyes, they were the same. Cold. Calculating. The kind of eyes that wrote history with lies. He blinked at me, then at Langston. Well, he said, "Didn't expect to see either of you alive." Langston bristled. I held up the folder. "We have questions." "I'm sure you do," he said, stepping aside. "Come in." The house smelled like expensive silence, old leather dust, and guilt. He poured whiskey for himself, offered none to us. "You know the rules," he said, sitting. Everything was classified. Still is. Whatever you think you know, it won't bring those men back. "No," I said, "but it might stop another lie." Langston slammed the folder on the coffee table. "We have tapes, maps, witnesses. You covered it up, Sloan. You sent us in blind." Sloan didn't flinch. He sipped his drink. "Orders came from above. We were a distraction. You were never meant to survive." Those words landed like a bullet to the chest. "You said the village was hostile," I whispered. "There were children." He looked at me, then really looked at me. And for a second, I saw something crack. Regret, maybe. Or maybe just the weight of years finally catching up. "I buried a lot of names for that mission," he said, "including my own. But you two, you were never supposed to walk out of that jungle." Tasha had heard enough. She stepped forward. "I'm going to publish all of this. Your confession. The documents. Everything." Sloan smiled. Not kindly. "You think the truth matters to them, they'll bury it again. Or spin it. You'll just be a footnote." Langston stood. Better a footnote than a lie. We left without another word. But the world outside that gated neighborhood wasn't ready for what came next. Tasha's story dropped within 24 hours. Whistleblower, veteran confronts officer, behind deadly operation, full confession included. It exploded. Every outlet picked it up. The Pentagon issued a vague statement. Talk shows debated whether old crimes could be punished. But on the streets on my sidewalk, people came in waves. Veterans, mothers, teachers. Kids who'd seen the video and wanted to know why. And then someone else showed up, a young woman. Maybe mid-20s. Brown curls, red coat, a nervous energy. She clutched a folded newspaper in one hand and something else in the other, a medal. "Are you Isaiah Briggs?" she asked. I nodded. She held out the medal. "This belonged to my grandfather. He served under you. He died in that mission. He talked about you before he passed. Said you saved his life once." I took the medal with trembling fingers. "I just wanted to say thank you," she whispered. "And I'm sorry. That was the first time I cried. Really cried. Not from shame, but from being seen. For the first time in decades, I felt like a man again, not a ghost, not a story, not a symbol. Just Isaiah. Just me." But the moment didn't last long. That night, my phone buzzed with a notification. A new video. The original egging clip, except this time it had been edited, twisted, overlaid with aggressive music and captions, calling me a fraud, a fake veteran, a professional victim. It had over 300,000 views in under 2 hours. They were trying to erase me again. But this time, the country pushed back. Comments flooded the video. "Shame on you. He's a hero. Read the full story before you judge. And somewhere in the noise, a voice cut through. It was Langston. He'd gone live. From the sidewalk. From our bench. He held my rose in one hand and said, "They tried to erase us in the jungle. They tried again on the internet. But we're still here. And we will be seen." And for once, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was respect. It was power. It was the sound of a storm breaking. I didn't used to believe in journalists. Not after the war, not after all the times I watched men like me get twisted into cautionary tales or political footnotes. Reporters came and went, chasing tragedy like it was currency. But Tasha Green was different. She didn't chase my story, she walked into it like someone who knew the terrain of hurt. And maybe that's why I let her in. Not because she asked questions, but because she stayed after the answers cut deep. The morning after Langston's live stream, I found Tasha already waiting at the sidewalk. No microphone, no camera. Just a notebook pressed flat against her knees, and a look on her face like she hadn't slept. She looked up when I rolled beside her. "They're trying to drown the story," she said. "Shadow accounts bots, counter articles. Someone's paying to make the truth disappear." I nodded. "So what now?" She flipped the notebook open. "Now we go deeper. We don't just tell what happened. We show why it was hidden." I looked out at the street at the gold-painted bench with my name on it. It still felt wrong, like sitting on a gravestone. "You're not scared?" I asked. She shook her head. "Terrified. But I'd rather be scared doing the right thing than safe doing nothing." That week, we worked like men on a deadline. Tasha spent hours digging through declassified documents, VA records court filings. Langston made calls to other vets, tracing survivors of our platoon, piecing together the names that the government had tried so hard to forget. And me, I told the truth again and again to anyone who would listen. And then came the email. It was sent anonymously. No subject line, no name, just one sentence. "Ask about the third tape." Tasha showed it to me with shaking hands. Third tape. Langston looked up from his chair. "There were only two, weren't there?" "No," I said slowly. "There was a third." I remembered now, like smoke lifting. The third cassette. The one Sloan made us destroy. Only Langston didn't destroy it. He kept it, hid it, and then forgot it. We tore through Langston's duffel that night, fingers shaking until we found it dusty, unlabeled magnetic ribbon barely holding together. "We need a player," Tasha said, and I smiled for the first time in hours. I know just the place. Old Joe's Pawn and Electronics had been a fixture on the block since I lost my leg. Joe was one of the few who treated me like a customer instead of a problem. He still used a landline, still called me Sergeant even when I stopped wearing the cap. He found an old tape player behind a pile of 90s boomboxes and set it on the counter. We inserted the tape, pressed play. The room filled with static, then voices, slurred, muffled, but clear enough. It was Sloan. Send them in anyway. Civilians be damned. We need a diversion. If they don't make it, we get the narrative. The press will follow orders. Then another voice. "Sir, we can't. There are children. That's an order. You're expendable." The tape ended in silence. Tasha stared at me. "This isn't just a scandal. This is war crime territory." Langston leaned back, jaw locked. "They sacrificed us for optics." I whispered, "No, not just us. The whole damn truth." That night we released the audio. No commentary, no edits. Just the tape and a single caption, they called us expendable. Listen, it exploded. News anchors wept on air. Politicians scrambled for statements. Memorials were defaced by protesters demanding truth. The Department of Defense issued a statement of grave concern, followed by a promise to investigate. But it wasn't enough, because, while the nation reeled from the sound of a cold-blooded command, the people on my street started asking a deeper question. Why didn't anyone stop it? And that's when Tasha made her most dangerous move yet. She asked the families. We drove for days across counties, across state lines. Mothers who kept medals in drawers they never opened. Sisters who had spent 30 years wondering why their brothers came home broken or didn't come home at all. Widows with stories that matched ours down to the time of day and the missing words in official reports. Tasha interviewed them all. She didn't sensationalize. She documented grief like it was sacred. And with each testimony, a clearer picture formed. Operation Hollow Lance wasn't an accident. It was a calculated illusion. They built it on silence, and they bet we'd stay quiet. But they were wrong. The final straw came 2 weeks later. Sloan died. Heart attack. No trial. No courtroom. No public reckoning. Tasha called me the moment she found out. Her voice was flat. They'll spin this as closure. No, I said. Not yet, because I had one more story to tell. Mine, the full one. I sat down with Tasha the next morning. No sidewalk, no bench, just a room with 4 white walls and a microphone. I was born in 1950, I began. Jackson, Mississippi. I was 13 when I saw my first lynching. I told it all. The pain, the war, the betrayal, the eggs, the silence, and the fight to reclaim my name. When we were done, Tasha hugged me. Not like a journalist, like a friend, like someone who had seen my soul and didn't flinch. She published the piece under one title, The Man They Tried to Erase. And that's when everything truly began. Congress called for hearings. The VA issued formal apologies to survivors of Hollow Lance. Schools began teaching the operation as a case study in systemic failure. But more importantly, people started asking why. Why do we forget the broken? Why do we mock the wounded? Why do we wait for tragedy to notice worth? I still sit on that sidewalk. Not every day, but sometimes. People join me now, not to pity, but to listen. And that sidewalk, it's not just a place they laughed anymore. It's where the truth stood up, even when I couldn't. I was never supposed to have a legacy. Not the kind that gets etched into plaques or read in textbooks. Men like me weren't built for that kind of remembrance. We were built for war, then built to disappear. And for a long time I did. I faded into alleys and silence, into the gaps between parades and broken promises. But now the world knew my name. Or so I thought. It happened on a rainy Wednesday, a week after Tasha's final article dropped. I was sitting on my sidewalk bench, watching the gray clouds creep across the sky like ghosts returning home, when a car pulled up sleek, black, expensive in that quiet kind of way that didn't announce itself but demanded attention. A man stepped out. Tall, pale, hair slicked back like old money. He wore a long beige coat and carried a portfolio under his arm. He walked with the certainty of someone who never had to ask for permission. "Mr. Isaiah Briggs?" he asked, glancing at a printed photo of me. "My name is Everett Sloan, Jr." I stared at him. The sun. He extended his hand. I didn't shake it. "I'm sorry about your father," I said flatly. He offered a tight smile. "I'm not here for condolences. I'm here because my father left a final statement. He said, If you ever came looking, if the truth ever came out, I was to give you this." He handed me the portfolio, his fingers brushing mine coldly. "There are names in there," he said. "People who ordered hollow lance." My father kept a ledger. Insurance, he called it. I thought it was paranoia. Now I understand. He didn't stay long. Didn't want to thank you. Just turned and left tires hissing through puddles as if he'd delivered poison and wanted no part of the aftermath. Langston and I opened the folder that night. Inside, yellowed documents, typewritten memos, signatures from men whose faces still adorned military halls and marble statues. Generals, politicians. One of them had a building named after him. Another had received the Medal of Freedom. "This is bigger than we thought," Langston said, breathless. "This," I muttered, "is history written in erasure." Tasha took one look and went pale. "If we publish this, it's not just your story anymore. It's the foundation of military myth." "Then let it crack," I said. She nodded, and the fire in her eyes lit the fuse. The article went live under a new name, the operation they named Success. How the U.S. sacrificed a platoon for politics. It hit like a second explosion. International news outlets picked it up. Protesters marched with signs bearing my name. Congressional hearings were scheduled. Survivors from other forgotten missions began coming forward. Kuwait, Iraq, Afghanistan. Different wars, same silence. But then came the twist. I received a letter, handwritten. No return address. Inside a photo, black and white, faded at the corners. It was me, young, not in uniform, in a suit, standing beside Martin Luther King Jr. I dropped the photo. Langston picked it up stunned. "What the hell is this?" I stared at it, mouth dry. "I forgot," I whispered. "God help me, I forgot." Memphis. I was barely 18, just before enlistment. I'd joined a march after school, one of Dr. King's final appearances. There was a photographer. I didn't think much of it then. I didn't tell anyone, not my unit, not the press, not even my mother, but someone remembered. The next morning, the photo was everywhere. Isaiah Briggs soldier, whistleblower, civil rights witness. And suddenly, my name wasn't just tied to eggs and silence, it was tied to a dream. But with reverence comes resistance. Hate mail poured in. Liar, traitor, professional victim. Someone scrawled, "Sit down and stay quiet," in red paint across the bench. Langston and I sat on it anyway, because history had tried to forget us. But we had the audacity to remember ourselves. A week later, an invitation arrived. Congress wanted me to testify, live, public, under oath. Langston and I stood together side by side, two broken men with whole stories. Before I left, I visited the church basement where I'd lived all those years. I sat on the cot, touched the Bible my mama gave me, looked at the picture of my brother, his smile frozen before Selma took him. I whispered to him, "We're not forgotten anymore, Elijah. They know our names now." At the hearing they asked me everything. Why I stayed silent, why I came forward, what justice looked like. I told them the truth. I didn't ask for fame. I asked to be seen. I didn't ask for justice. I asked to be counted. And I'm not here to bury the military. I'm here to unearth the parts they forgot to honor. The room was quiet. Then applause. Not from politicians. From the families, the wives, the sons and daughters of the ghosts who marched with me unseen, unburied. Tasha held my hand afterward. "You did it?" she whispered. "No," I said. "We started it. Because legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you force the world to face before you go." And I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. You ever stand somewhere and feel like you're standing in the middle of your own obituary? Only you ain't dead yet. That's how I felt the day they unveiled the monument. Sky was clear, too clear, like the heavens were holding their breath. I sat there in my chair, Langston on my left, Tasha on my right, surrounded by hundreds of people I never thought would remember men like us. Reporters were everywhere, cameras clicking like cicadas in summer, but all I could hear was the wind whispering the names of the boys we lost. Names that had finally been carved into something permanent. The monument wasn't grand. It wasn't marble. It was steel. Rusted at the edges, clean in the center, with each name from Operation Hollow Lance etched in bold, brutal truth. No rank, no title, just names, just the men. And at the bottom, beneath the rest, there were 2 more lines. Isaiah Briggs. He spoke when silence was easier. Langston Charles. He kept the tape. People cheered. Some cried. Me, I just sat there holding a single paper rose in my hand, the last one I'd ever make. I pressed it against the plaque like a prayer and whispered, "You're home now, boys." But this wasn't the end. Because the moment the applause faded and the ribbons fell and the suits turned away to shake hands and pose for interviews, I noticed a young man standing back near the fence. No phone, no camera, just watching. His skin was dark like mine. Eyes sharp, quiet, unsure. He wore a faded hoodie-baggy jeans, and he couldn't have been older than 20. Something about him tugged at me. I rolled over, slow and steady, until I was face to face with him. "You know someone here?" I asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, my granddad, Jerome Parks. His name's 3rd one down." My breath caught. Jerome Parks. My medic. The boy who died, screaming into the radio, begging for a medevac that never came. I remembered holding his hand, telling him the birds were coming. Lying. He was brave, I said. The kid's eyes welled up. They said he overdosed back home. They said it was his fault. But now I know the truth. I reached out and pressed the rose into his hand. Then, don't let them forget him again. He stared at the rose like it was sacred. That's when I realized what this had all been for. Not the news, not the hearings, not even the plaque. It was so they would remember. So they'd carry the truth when we no longer could. That night, Tasha held a candlelight vigil outside the church that once gave me shelter. People read names aloud. Veterans saluted. Strangers held hands. A choir sang softly beneath the moonlight. Langston gave a short speech. Then they asked me to speak. I didn't read from notes. I didn't clear my throat. I just told them the truth the way I'd always wanted to. I spent most of my life thinking I was broken, I said. Thinking that what I lost made me invisible. But I wasn't broken, I was buried. Under fear, under history, under silence. And it took something cruel to dig me up. I don't thank those boys for what they did. But I thank the world for what it did after. Because for the first time, people listened. And maybe that's all we ever wanted. There was silence after I finished. Not the awkward kind. The kind that feels like respect. Like listening. Later that week I went back to my sidewalk. Sat in my usual spot. But this time the bench wasn't empty. That same young man, Jerome's grandson, was there waiting. He had a new bouquet of paper roses in his lap. Made from old newspapers. He handed me one. I figured, maybe I could help you sell these. I smiled. You already are. And for the first time in a long time I felt something warm rise in my chest. Not pride. not peace. Purpose. Because stories like mine don't end with a plaque. They end when no one needs them anymore. And that, I think, is still a long ways off. But at least now, we've started. Sometimes it takes the world's cruelty to uncover one man's buried truth. Isaiah Briggs was mocked, humiliated, and cast aside not because he was weak, but because he dared to be silent in a world that only listens when we scream. Yet in his silence lived the echoes of forgotten soldiers, the weight of injustice, and the quiet strength of dignity. This story isn't just about a man in a wheelchair. It's about what we choose to see and who we choose to remember. Because the meaning of life isn't in medals, money, or monuments, it's in memory. And when we choose to honor truth even when it's uncomfortable, we build a better world for those still silenced. If this story moved, you don't let it fade away. Subscribe to our channel for more true stories that reveal hidden courage and justice. Comment below. What would you do if you saw injustice happening right in front of you? Share this video to remind the world every name matters. Every voice counts.